Welcome to the council meeting of October the 1st, 2019 at 4:40 p.m. Notice, at its meeting on October the 15th, 2019, council will consider bylaws related to the sale of 70 and 72 Balsam and property along Dark Street. We'll have a moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White. The council approves the agenda for its regular meeting of October 1st, 2019, with the addition of item 6A, 100th anniversary request, the volunteer appreciation evening.
All in favor? Approved. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? None declared. Petitions and delegations? None declared. Acceptance of the minutes and recommendations.
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White. The council accepts the minutes of the following meetings. The minutes of the special planning meeting of council held September 17th, 2019, and the minutes of the regular meeting of council held September 17th, 2019.
All in favor? Approved. Unanimous. Reports of municipal officers and communications. Councillor Stacey White and Councillor Casey Owens.
So I don't know how you want us to proceed with this. I hope all council has read the terms of reference, so I don't really need to read through it unless that's the desire. Did anybody have, do you want me to read through it? Did anybody have any comments? Rick made me aware prior that page 3 under terms, I did forget to include the word post in post-secondary education. So right there. So.
I have one other comment, and that was the comment regarding other counselors showing up at your meetings. You could end up with a meeting of council if you have 4 counselors or more at the meeting, and I'm not sure how you're going to handle it because now you have to have probably somebody like Joanne taking minutes and having a meeting of council, so that might be an issue.
Yeah, so I took basically the economic development terms of reference and copied it and changed it for our youth committee. So I'm not opposed to taking that out, but for general interest, if anybody wanted to show up or had something to say, we can like ensure that not 4 of us would be in the room at the same time. But yes, I do agree.
Joanne will clarify that.
Yeah, so if there is going to be a quorum of council, generally we just ask that you let us know, and then we'll make arrangements to deal with it that way. It is in your procedure bylaw that any council member can attend anybody's meeting. You're just not a voting member of that committee, but just if it is going to be a quorum, then we need to make arrangements.
Okay. Patrick?
Yep, just on staff resources, so what would be the plan? If we vote this in, do you have staff resources lined up, or are you going to be doing it?
So that's why we put in the word possibly. If we didn't want to pressure any staff member to be having to come if they did not want to, I'm fully prepared to do all the necessary secretarial work, as well as Casey, I'm sure, so we can trade off on that. But if a staff was willing to show up, we'd certainly appreciate it, but we're not going to force any staff member to be a part of it.
Yeah, our problem is not somebody wanting to attend, finding somebody. That's generally where the issue is. As we go forward with the administrative assistant hiring, that is one of the things that we may want to look at, is having that person participate in some of these meetings, because we have quite a few committees. It could get onerous on a select few individuals.
Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I was wondering if our manager at Hockey Heritage North, if he didn't have any bookings, might be available to do this type of work. He's more than capable.
He's very, very capable.
Yes, I know.
My concern would be that often he won't be able to tell you whether he has a booking or not until very late in the game.
Okay.
If we have other staff there, that's certainly a museum as well. That is something we could look at, but in terms of where it fits under a mandate, insofar as that this is very much a reflective of this, of the council as opposed to other mandates, perhaps it would be better within the administration. Certainly, let's take a look at how we can handle it.
So you don't see it as an insurmountable problem then?
Only one among many. So, that's okay.
In other words, it's doable.
We have no choice. If we can't do it, we do it anyway.
Joe?
So I have a motion that is moved by Councillor Stacey White, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council accepts the Kirkland Lake Youth Council Committee terms of reference with amendments as presented.
All in, any questions? Oh, vote early and often. All in favor? Unanimous. Proposed community grant program.
I'd like to thank council for just the opportunity to bring it back for discussion. At the last meeting, the directions were very clear to apply for the museum and define that that was eligible and what the terms would be. And then, as I said in the email to council, the second stream, which is a smaller stream, being used for parks and rehabilitation and renovation of to improve accessibility and add accessible structures on municipal playgrounds. I did call the Ontario Heritage Trust, which owns the museum, and they're great. They really like the fact that we would apply on their behalf. They said that most of the other municipalities are not doing that. Mostly they don't. They just don't feel that will fit. But they are very supportive. The thing is, they will not put any financial dollars towards it. Also, they will continue to hold the reins on which contractors can work. It has to be an OHT certified to work on a historical building. To give you an example, in the 207 report where they were talking about replacing the roof, it was $160,000 with a caveat that if you need to bring somebody in from Southern Ontario who is OHT qualified, it will be 3 to 4 times that price. So that is a cause for concern. The other one was the commentary from our ministry guy, liaison, that they, for the larger stream, they are looking for more multi-purpose type of applications, but of course it's municipalities' discretion what they want to apply for. I wrote the email to council because to me it came down to issues of ownership, usage rates, impact on the community, impact on the municipality financially, and from that I drew the conclusion and recommended to council that the museum continue to be part of the application, but under stream number 2, because a dollar figure that you're entitled to should be sufficient to do most of the heavy work at the museum, again cost dependent on what kind of contractors you have to bring in, but at least it's more applicable and we could still do the work. For the larger stream, I recommended the original complex building, the original recreational facility. That's based, like I said in my email, on concerns that you have a number of items over the next 5 to 10 years that you will be forced to deal with. And this is an opportunity to leverage those dollars to get more dollars to be able to deal with it at a lesser expense to the taxpayer. From that context, I think you have a better chance of success, you have a greater community impact, and you have a more beneficial financial impact on the corporation, as such, I put forward that request that you reconsider this and give us direction.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, from what I read, I understand that applying for funding for the museum is a weak application, and if they're gonna give away that money, and they consider this a weak application, it probably means that we won't be getting any funding for the museum. Is that what I understand?
I think that's a possibility, and so if we're going to gamble, gamble with lesser of a pot.
Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I have some concerns about this whole process. A lot of getting a grant is how you sell the project. And to suggest that the museum is a single, is not a multi-purpose facility, I don't think is being fair to the museum. It's a museum, it's an art gallery, it provides children's activities. I have used it as a research facility when I was working. It offers artisans local artisans a place to sell their goods. It has its own retail store. It also rents rooms to events in the community. I've been to many there because of my past job. We've had cabinet ministers in there making announcements. When Sudbury Contact decided to go ahead on its Victoria Creek shaft sinking, that announcement was made at the museum. We've had roundtables between the prospectors and government officials in that building. They hold special events such as Canada Day events. They were involved with the 100th anniversary, so I'm disappointed that the museum was sort of, in my opinion, sold short on that. I also have concerns that not all the council was aware of the upcoming expenses at the complex, and we certainly weren't aware of them during budget meetings. I think this is something council should have known about at budget meetings, so that we could have planned to start putting money away to cover all or our portion of those expenses. I mean, they're 5 years off, but 5 years from now is not the time to be sitting there saying we got to come up with this money. Now's the time. So, while I can understand the logic for the change, and there are some things at the complex that definitely need done. Anybody that's watched a hockey game will know that you don't know what direction the puck's coming when it comes off the boards. That affects the quality of play for sure. I'm more concerned about safety issues that I had when I coached there. There's a number of places in those boards where a fast skating person can get his stick stuck in the boards and the butt end in his stomach, and I've done that a few times when I played. It's not a pleasurable experience. There's legislation saying that we have to replace some of the refrigeration unit. Yes, I totally agree with that. So I can support the change. I'm just not happy with the process.
Councillor, we did take all of council through the facilities, and these shortcomings were pointed out prior to your assuming office. The previous report did indicate and provided a list and did indicate that these items were coming up as well. Now, everything you've said, I agree with. The museum is a multi-use facility, as is Heritage North, as actually is the library. We can make the argument any way, but which is the argument that has the greatest impact on the community and the municipality is the perspective that I have to take. Yep. Well, that's a really good way to throw you off your train of thought. But again, and it is at council's discretion, whichever direction you wish to go, we can go. But we are obligated as staff to point out where the issues are today, where the issues will be tomorrow, and to draw those to your attention. I mean, in a 5-year to 10-year period, you're looking at $2.2 million worth of items that have to be dealt with at the museum. At some point, if we wish to keep the facility going, we're going to deal with them. Sorry, not at the museum, at the complex. That was really helpful to my own argument. With the museum, those items are as important, roughly totaling about $1 million. So just on the basis of the dollar figure itself, I feel obligated to bring it forward. That's really.
I can understand Councillor Owen's concern. The process could have been a little bit clearer up front, and we probably would have went with the option that you're presenting now earlier, but it is what it is. And I do support the logic in recommending this particular change to the more towards the complex than the museum, but the museum will still be considered in the process. But I do support the change. Councillor Owens?
Yeah, I thought the thing was turned off, so I don't understand. In terms of the number of people it will affect, in the last number of years, the museum seems to have gotten less and less attention, shall we say, from past councils. At one time, it was something that was promoted quite a bit. I don't believe we have done that. We switched over to promoting recreation and the complex. So there's a number of factors in why the museum isn't attracting the numbers, and this is not the time or place to get into it. But I think part of it is the fact that council put its priorities on the complex and away from the museum.
Any other comments? Councillor White?
Sorry, at the time that this was proposed, the library board also was in the midst of going for the Canada Post Foundation grant, and unfortunately, we were made aware at our meeting that we were not successful in that attempt. Our CEO, Cheryl Lafreniere, did forward the grant to myself and to Wilf, and I hope I forwarded it to everybody. If I didn't, please forgive me. I will do it when I get home. I was wondering if that can also go to the second stream, since the paperwork is pretty on par with what the OSIP was looking for. I don't know if that can go in the secondary stream as well?
Yes, you can have multiple applications under the secondary stream. My apologies, I did want to raise that at the meeting today too. I think that the total amount was between 15 and 25,000 for that.
I didn't see that. I'm not saying you didn't send it, but I didn't see it.
I tried to do it in
Okay.
groups of two, so.
So that still can be included. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Adams?
Yep, so for the first stream, when we're talking about the use of the old pool, are we going with that estimate that was provided for like another school gym?
I really wanted to bring that back to as the second part for this discussion. I can hand this out, what is critical over the next 10 years. And from the list that I provided last week too, you'll see other items in there. What is important to council? The old pool area, at some point we're going to be dealing with it. And at this point, is somebody going to come back and say you have to turn that into an additional utility room, or I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the right terms, but for infrastructure and that, I don't know. but it does have to be dealt with at some point. Even if it just means, okay, fix it up, put the roofs on the outside just to secure it, whichever. There are other items on that list as well that, amenities for youth activities, going back again to what you were just talking about with the youth council, is that something? I'm asking for direction on that, actually.
Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I viewed that list, oh, sorry.
He's pointing at me this time.
Oh, I see. But he said Counselor,
talk more-
he said Counselor Owen.
Yeah, anyway,
Councillor Casey.
we can do that if it works. I think for, like, not that I pay attention to a lot of what is said in social media, whatever, but I think at this point, if we're gonna go with the complex, we have to do just what is necessary for the survival of this building, so we don't end up with a more upset people because now they can't use the pool because part of the building is condemned because of an ice chiller or something like that. So if we, like the old pool area, if it works, not if it works, if it's not in danger of collapsing, if it's not in danger of causing harm to the rest of the building, can we just put that like way down the road and just concentrate on the chiller, the roof if it has to be done, like important stuff.
And Bonnie did update that key list. It's being handed out to you because she was able to get in some of the later prices. It comes out, like I said, about 2.2. These are the things that will have to be dealt with, I said, between 5 and 10 years. So that is your critical list.
Wolf, does that, sorry, Rick, does that, when you have roof, does that include the roof for the whole complex?
No, that's just over
That's
the
just
arena.
for that,
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe so. Is Bonnie here? Yeah. If you want to come up, yeah.
So work was done on the roof over the old pool a number of years ago, and then obviously the new build. So those two areas are not included, but the rest of the facility is included in square footage for the new roof price. So it's definitely all of the arena, but it also kind of comes out over some of the lobby as well. So it's the roof that has not been done.
okay, thank you. Councillor Owens?
Yeah,
Owen,
yeah, okay, I'll answer to Owens and he can answer to Owen, that's okay. Yeah, I looked at the original list as a wish list, not as this was what is going to be done. Even on the second list, I have some real questions, but I'm not sure tonight's the right meeting to bring it up. I don't know. You know, you've got this end of useful life thing written down there. Well, let's take the Olympia, for example. I'd like to see the repair records, to see. You know, the boards, yeah, I already mentioned them. It's both a quality of the game and safety factor. Dehumidification, increased capacity required. Well, if we shorten the ice season, which would save taxpayers money, we wouldn't have the problem with the fogging up of the glass. You know, we wouldn't have to increase dehumidity. Anyways, compressors, condenser. Hot water and demand heaters, end of useful life. Well, are they still working? You know?
Yeah, and they're gonna die at some point, as we all
I
do.
know, and so's my 2004 Honda, but it's still driving. I'm not gonna replace it.
We're not rushing out to replace it either, but we're looking over a 10-year period.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that I have an issue with replacing things simply because somebody has deemed it's end of life, if it's still functioning and operating. The ice pad, does it have cracks in it? Is it deteriorating? Like,
Yes.
what is the problem with the ice pad?
Cracking. You do need to take a look at it.
No,
and
I
again,
know, that's why I'm
That's
asking
right,
the
but with a
question.
qualified person, not you or I. We're not qualified.
Well, I've,
Councillor White. Well, are you finished, Rick?
I guess so.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I need to chill a little, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
Councillor
think
White.
as far as, I think we're in agreement that if the museum is not gonna, lose their opportunity, we're just gonna shift it down. Obviously, this is potentially a lot of money, that we may be able to get. We do still have to come up with 26.7%. How are we going to do that? That is a big issue for me, because no matter what good we try to do, it will add to the burden of the taxpayers. So this is a big concern for me. And not only that, my second and last comment is, if it comes down to health and safety or legislation, we should never say no to it. Health and safety, legislation, just get it done. If we have the opportunity, just get it done.
To your first point, yes, we agree. And the problem is that we're facing the same issues with legislation, health and safety across the board in every facility. And trying to get them sorted out and dealt with, it will be a multi-year approach. In terms of the dollars themselves, the funding goes until 2027. You're paying as the bills come in. You're not putting up a full amount up front and going, so it will be incremental as you're going through the funding program.
I think one of the other things to note, along the line what you're saying, Stacy, if you looked at that list, that, the updated list, there's easily $1 million worth of legislated, improvements that have to be done over the next couple of years, including accessibilities and, the chillers. One way or the other, we have to come up with the money. It's easier to come up with 26% or 27% than 100, that's for sure. So, this opportunity isn't gonna come to council very often. It doesn't come very often. I've never seen it, in the past, so, I think we have to take it while it's there. And my humble apologies, Mr. Owen, for cutting you off. Okay, thank you. Councillor Adams.
So so what would we feel comfortable with, right? That would be the question, and then I don't think we're going to go for the full 2.2, which is even everything on there anyways. Still two unknowns. So
My recommendation would be to, over the 10, or until 2027, let's aim for that and see what they actually are coming back with, because otherwise, you know, in year 2025, somebody's going to be sitting here thinking, I thought we had payment, we had a fund for all this, we had grant money, and now here's an additional hit. If we've scoped out what is critical, that we confirm the prices for that and put the application in for it.
So is it
Suggestion.
going to be specific to one of them? Like, so we go for it all, but then it's like, well, you got $350,000 for boards, right? Do we have to do it for boards, or is that?
Usually you're putting the costs as soft and hard, and so you do have some flexibility moving back and forth. Often, and that can change from whoever's writing the application or administering the contracts. But normally they give you that flexibility as well. If you do see that you do need more money in one spot, less in another, you can ask for an amendment to the contract. It allows you to shift the dollars between the columns. Bonnie, you have anything to add on that? Because you dealt with these people a little, well, no, these are new to you too, yeah?
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. They typically in the grant application ask you to identify what you're going to do and what the projected cost is, but they do allow you to move typically with amendments as things go on. The one comment I did want to make, if I may, is that the hard thing in a recreation facility is that you can't walk into a store and buy a chiller, or you can't walk into a store and buy an Olympia. So if something goes, we are down, and it could be 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So I totally sympathize with the fact you don't want to spend money when you don't have to, but if we aren't proactive And we kind of want to go with what the industry standard is on what we should be able to get out of a piece of equipment and plan for it to fail at some point in there. I think if we aren't proactive, we're not really doing our jobs. Because we've been told sometimes that we don't.
So from ours, if we could get a sense of guidance on that, because we're running out of time to engage somebody to make sure we get the right amounts, we'd like to get, as to your point earlier, as close to an accurate estimate as we possibly can. And while we may have the prices for individual items, with a 40-year-old facility, you can guarantee there's going to be some kind of snafu there somewhere. That would be the direction. The one for the museum is slightly easier, as I said in my report, because they did do a condition survey in 2007, and Heritage Trust is relatively comfortable with just adding in the inflation per year since 2007 to come up with a price for now. I'm less comfortable with it, simply because, again, the requirement to use certified contractors, but I think that that's probably the right way to proceed at this point.
Councillor Owens. Owens, I said.
Yeah.
Or it's Owen.
Sorry.
I got in touch with my inner chiller and I'm okay now. And it didn't cost $150,000, but it still does the job. Wilf, would it be in our best interest to apply for everything on this list? Would we, like, okay, I don't understand why we need to spend $100,000 on a recreation master plan. That one just boggles my mind. But I'm asking for your advice as CAO in dealing with funding agencies. Is it, like, if we applied for the full amount, could they come back and say we're only funding 3 of the whatever?
Yes, they could, but we'd also be working with our ministry advisor to see what's realistic, what isn't, as we go through it. Your question actually it's a good question because it has a different answer, and one is, what's our financial capacity? We apply for this, the whole shoot and caboodle, you know, aim for the sky, hit the earth, walk away with a mouthful of leaves. That's normal, but right now Sherry would be looking at it and saying, even in a 10-year period, 5 million, so you're putting in 500,000, that's going to be tight. What we would be doing, and I would be asking Sherry to do this, is projecting forward what we would, you know, with Bonnie, what would we be putting aside in operating and capital over that period? When would these things start to come into play? And then forming the answer on the basis of that. It's not a simple and clear-cut answer. Yes, aim for as much as you can. What can you afford over what time period? And what will you cut when they say, we don't like that?
Yeah, I think I asked this at the last council meeting, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to reconfirm that, let's say we applied for the $2,200,000 and we got it. And then, like you say, we realized we couldn't come up with our 26%. We can go back to the ministry, right, and say, unfortunately, we can't meet this commitment. We're only doing 50% of that work, or...
Yeah, you can, and that's an amendment again. Reality, again, like, is because you have from now to 2027, and you don't have to do it all in one shot, that you are budgeting those dollars anyway. So you have that. Your previous question was also about the recreation master plan. Increasingly, it's the governments are asking to see, where are you going? Why are you doing something when you apply for funding? How does it fit in with your overall vision for the community in that? You're seeing that now with every capital asset related grant application, even like on roads, on waterworks, wherever. How does that fit in? Recreation is not any different. They are asking to see too, what are you just doing this as a one-off because the dollars are there and you can't sustain it? Or how does it fit? How have you projected who your audiences are, what the right kind of rates are you do? Again, we could do that on our own at $100,000. Why not ask for it? Say that all these items that we're putting in is part of a master plan to keep our key recreational facility functioning for the next 30 years, so we can accomplish what? Like I said before, I'm a liar for hire. I can lie all the way through these applications and make you look good, but it's not getting you anywhere. Because what you really do want to do is, at the end of your term, right, this project is still going on. Set up your justifications, your explanations, and have a guide to take you further. If we don't do that in engineering, if we don't do that in recreation, if we don't do that in asset management, we're not going to get out of the particular hole that we're in, where we've been managing day to day. It is a recommendation that I've already discussed strategy core, and I was going to bring forward to council. If this is a way to do it, I'd like to. That's my argument. Sorry, went overboard.
Thanks, Wilf, because what I had in mind as a recreation master plan was totally different than what you just explained. And thanks for explaining what it is. Now I understand that if we want grants, we have to show where we're going. I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, but if that's what we have to do, now I understand. Thank you.
Councillor White?
Sorry, just before the clerk writes up the thing, I wanted to get support from all councils to add the library to the second stream. Sorry.
Councillor Adams?
So is it gonna be possible to get a projection on like what this is all gonna cost over the next years before we?
Yes, and when we put the application together, we'll have those numbers for you. We can bring it, and then we can say, okay, this is what your cost is over this period of time. And I'm sure that if there's anything, we'll get a rap on the knuckles from Sherry anyway, if it's wrong. So she'll straighten us out for that, be part of the presentation. That would be for all the projects that you apply for the, I keep saying parking lot accessibility, the playground accessibility, museum, and library.
I think the nice part about this too, Wilf, is the fact that it can be stretched out. We don't have to come up with 27% or 26, whatever it is, immediately. Just as the project, each individual part of the project is being put forward, so makes it a little easier from a cash flow standpoint.
The risk will be that the program will be oversubscribed. That's inevitable because nobody has given any money for recreation and culture in over a generation. So we need to have good numbers, and we need to put forward a strong case, and we still need to accept that it may not be what we want.
Any further comments, discussion? Joanne?
Okay, just a question. So I have written up that council supports this change. Are you also asking, or you wanting to put in the accessible playgrounds in the stream too also? Was that?
That was from the previous meetings, at council's direction, so I would think that we do put that in.
In the small stream.
In the small stream, yeah.
Okay, so I have a motion that's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council supports the change in the applications to the Investing in Canada Fund 2. Stream number 1, the rehabilitation of the complex, and stream number 2 will be the Museum of Northern History, the Tech Centennial Library, and the accessible playgrounds.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Councilor Owen, I apologize for being short. That wasn't a call for. Sorry about that.
It was me.
Let's stick to politics, okay?
Actually, I jumped ahead here, Wilf, and called this I went,
Oh, no, you're right, you're right. My next one is this one.
yeah, but I think I mentioned this is what we're gonna discuss, which is not the case. Now we're discussing the proposed community grant program.
As I said in my report, years ago, the municipality did have a community grant policy, and we don't know where it disappeared to. I think that it just was part of the overall cost cutting that happened in the late 90s, early 2000. You fast forward to about 2015, 2016, When the applications were going in for the aquatic center, one of the arguments, because the provincial government would not fund that at all, they came back to the municipality and said, well, there is interest in funding projects that may stimulate sports tourism. So Kirkland Lake actually drafted a lot of the contextual information that the government now uses to fund these kind of facilities, and that as part of that, the municipality brought forward a sports tourism strategy. It was loosely defined in a sense, if you're bringing an event or conducting an event that will bring people to the town, then the municipality will assist you. They were not giving out money, or the municipality was not giving out money. It was usually in form of waiver of fees or access to facilities or anything like that. Since that time, we've seen it increasingly get away from being just sports. You've seen contemporary arts, you've had others coming forward. And when we first met with council at the start of your term, we had suggested that it was probably time to revisit that and how you structure it. Excuse me. And that instead of being specific like that, you set up a fund for community grants that is at council's discretion where you're going to put that money. We went through the policies of other municipalities, the previous one that Kirkland Lake had, called a couple of municipalities as to what fits in. So the range that we're suggesting, the fact that it even includes individuals, is a little bit unusual. But it does make sense in the fact that sometimes an individual comes forward with an idea that no organization is able to do, but it can stimulate something. So we put that one in. There's an aspect in there for travel. Well, again, you're representing your municipality, your community, and so we put that one in too. Is that something that council wants to stand behind? You have somebody going to the national championships or something. Sorry about that. In terms of what it encompasses, we put forward all the costs that a municipality absorbs. So under sports tourism, somebody will come forward and say, okay, we want you to waive all the rink fees or the ice fees for 1 year because we're going to have 2 or 3 events. There's no such thing as free. It's still being racked up somewhere in the budget. And so what we were trying to do is use this community grant as a means to track applications and dollar amounts so you can account for it to the public in the future. So that's in there, as well as direct dollar grants. An application form would have to be put together. Our recommendation is that it is the clerk receives all applications, make sure that they're done correctly, and there should not be onerous, sends them over to the Economic Development Committee because they have generally the mandate for community and economic development, and this is certainly a community development tool. They would make go through them, make the recommendations to council. It is council's decision. Estimate right now is $25,000 budget with a maximum of $5,000, cannot be continually applied for. Does not be used for hiring people or for depreciation, bank loans, buying capital. If you are buying capital, you follow the same rules as we do. Come forward with 3 quotes and have a good reason why you're not taking the lowest one. So we tried to blend that into one policy. I do declare it a draft policy because I'm sure that there will be many comments and other suggestions from council that we do need to build into them. I ask that if we could discuss the main points of the policy as proposed, and if there's fine tuning, that you let me know, I can adjust it and bring it back then.
Comments? Councillor Owen?
Yeah, my concern is that I want one standard policy that applies to all groups the same. No special, nobody gets special treatment. And that's a big issue with me. I'm not convinced that our sports tourism strategy ever worked. It didn't bring any new events to town. yes, it alleviated the organizations putting on events, so it helped them sustain themselves, which is also important. But I also question, I don't know what accountant did those figures of how much per night, but I was on the road for many years with all three of my kids, and let me tell you, I didn't spend what they're suggesting per night. Yes, there are families that spend more than that, but my family was the one that went to the grocery store, some tournaments, bought our food and ate it in the room. So I just have a hard time with that figure. But at the end of the day, what I'd like to see council do is come up with one policy that fits all, and all groups are treated equally. I think there's been a conception, rightly or wrongly, out there that some groups receive special treatment. And personally, I don't know whether they did or not, but I don't like the idea of the ratepayers thinking that council gave some groups priority over others. I don't like the idea of giving free use of the facilities. We've seen that just explode. I mean, it started with ice time under certain conditions, and then all of a sudden now we're giving away the museum and I think Heritage North, the airport. So this way we'll be able to contain how much money we're spending, and it'll be much easier in the accounting end, I'm sure, to track it.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, actually, I like the idea of us having a budget, limiting it to a certain amount. That means that over the year, we'll spend or let people use that amount in freebies. It makes us responsible for deciding who gets what and how much of it they get. And it puts a cap on what we will allow to be used through the year, which I think is great, and I think it makes this council truly responsible for the amount that we allow people to get free access to the arena, free access to Heritage North, free access to the museum. I understand it costs the taxpayers dollars, or there's less revenue coming in for those events. But I think it makes us think about it, and I think it's just a great way of handling this one item where you're not giving away $100,000 in giveaways through the year. So I think it works well.
I do think we do, oh, sorry, Patrick. Okay, I do think we do need a policy in place similar like this. One of the other options, which is it'll be for a different discussion and won't affect us this year, but I know Councillor White had mentioned in the past about the tourism tax, hotel tourism tax, that could partially fund some of these things. So I think we might be able to be a little more flexible in our ability to fund some of these community grants. So I'm hoping that comes back under discussion within the new year. Councillor Adams?
Just a question about intakes and the rationale between two of them, February and June. So they got them in February, so I guess your event has to happen before June, or?
I think that would be at council's guidance, but I would think that you can actually carry it past that calendar year, but it's allocated, and you just you know
Just
where
trying
it
to
is.
group them so you can not run out of the pot.
That's right, and there may be things that come up during the course of the year that are maybe really, really good, but if you've already closed your door, then it makes it harder.
Just some of the applications that have come through, they've been in that like 3-month window, right? So that June one, right? I'd be open to a quarterly intakes, certainly, over the two.
And that's the kind of stuff I like to get feedback from council on, you know. You're, regardless of what it is, you will see your running budget, so you know what you have, both in hand and what you've already promised out. So it's not going to be difficult in that regard. It may be a bit more of an administrative issue, both for the committee, because they're meeting far more often on this. But that's something that we can discuss, and we can also change it by bringing it back to council if it doesn't work.
Councillor Perrier?
I mean, in the past, I've always thought that this was basically the only way you got any discounts was if you had a certain portion of your teams from out of town. And if it didn't meet that criteria, you didn't get a discount on the fields or whatever you were running. I always thought this to be unfair because you could have 12 teams from town and 2 from out of town, you wouldn't get anything. But those 12 teams from town are still doing everything that the out of town teams would be doing.
Yes, and then probably in the course of the event, are spending more money.
Yeah, so, and I always thought that that was unfair, and I think that has a lot to do with why a lot of tournaments and things like that have been kiboshed in Kirkland Lake.
Councillor White?
Like Rick, I would support doing away with the sports tourism strategy. Unfortunately, it just didn't live up to what the good intentions were. We didn't see the influx of new activities happening, and I would like all community grants run out of the policy, whether it be sports, whether it be for our activities at the museum, the library, anything that we need to either donate money to or give freebies for. I'd like it to come out of the one single streamlined process.
I do have to caution that there are probably groups out there that have been counting on the sport tourism over the 2019 year. If we put this into effect, we can, I don't have the figures as to what's left in the $25,000 allotment for this year, but we would, I can anticipate that some groups will still come forward to council and try to make that pitch. So Bonnie, I don't know if you know of any that are, I'm thinking of the gold miners, and we can try to get a summary of that too, so you know what's coming up.
Sorry, just a quick one before Rick. I believe the last time we spoke, it was about 8,000. You said that it was about 8,000 left.
Thank you.
Councillor Owens? Owen?
Yeah. In fairness to volunteer groups that are already operating, on the assumption that they're going to get the same deal they had last year.
Those are only on the assumption they can apply, that's all.
Yeah, okay. I think that it would be wise of council to look at phasing this in somehow, because I was part of a volunteer organization. Actually, it was Second Street Daycare many years ago, and all of a sudden the town decided that we weren't getting the subsidies that we had already budgeted for, and you know, it really put the organization into upheaval, because somehow we had to come up with that money for the rest of the year. And I certainly, I appreciate what volunteers in the community do, and I wouldn't want them to go through what the board of Second Street went through. So I think we have to use some discretion for the first year, but only for the first year.
This would apply for next year, right? So, because for this year, I mean, the year's almost over, so I don't see it being a problem. And if this is part of our 2020 budget, unfortunately, not to take away from groups or volunteer organizations, but if the rules have changed, the rules have changed, and public sector is changing right now in Ontario. Financial realities are a heck of a lot tighter than what they used to be 2 years ago before the Ford government came in, and that's part of reality. We're strapped for cash right now, so if we don't have more money than $25,000, then unfortunately it sucks, but that's reality.
If I could suggest, it comes in for 2020, you have what's left in the pot right now for 2019. You make your decisions as they come forward, but from 2020 it's in place.
Councillor Owens?
Okay, the problem with that for me is that, let's take minor hockey. Now, I haven't talked to minor hockey, I'm not speaking on their behalf, but I am speaking on my experience as 4 years president of minor hockey many years ago. Your budget's done before the season starts. It takes you into the coming year. That executive would have had no way of knowing that things were going to change halfway through what is sort of their financial year. That's what I'm concerned about. The only forewarning they got was comments that I made that upset them. Okay? But I'm one counselor. So I think it's very difficult, and it would be the same for if it affects the swim team, because their season starts now or a few weeks ago and goes through into 220. We got to remember their volunteers, their budget's done before we're coming up with this new policy. That's why I would like to see some discretion, because I don't want to tick off those volunteers and then all of a sudden the young people in Kirkland Lake can't have sports organizations that they once had, because the adults have said, well, if we're not appreciated by council, we're not going to bother doing it.
Bonnie?
I can respond to that a little bit. We did meet with all of the user groups in July, and we let them know that it's quite possible there would be a lot of changes with sports tourism, so don't bank on it. Keep it in your back pocket that you may be able to approach council depending on what the budget was like to ask for things, so they're all very aware of that, and we did reiterate that, so it won't be a surprise.
Thank you.
I take back
go
all
ahead.
my comments now.
Joanne?
Okay, I've got two resolutions here. The first one's pretty simple. It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White, that council has received the draft community grants policy from the acting chief administrative officer, and that council will send comments to the acting chief administrative officer for discussion at a future meeting. Okay, so you've got this. If anybody has any comments, it will bring back a final at a future meeting.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Now, the second part of it, I'm really at a loss for. So this has to do with sports tourism, and it's, there is a policy in place at this time that sports tourism is in effect. And we do have a club who did want to come to council tonight and ask for an application under the sports tourism. So I put them off until next meeting because I wasn't sure where council wanted to go with this. So, do you want to just leave this, have the group come to you next week and they can petition under the money that's still available? And then we can repeal this sports tourism policy when the other one comes into effect. Is that okay with council?
Possible to have it end December 31st, sports tourism, put
Sports
that in place?
tourism?
Yeah.
Definitely we can do
And
that.
so budget process, so would the community grant one be January 1st then? Yes. So then we just vote on it to end and new one starts.
Sherry, anything to add? Okay.
So this is moved by Councillor Stacey White, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The council approves that the sports tourism program come to an end at December 31st, 2019.
All in favor? Unanimous? Sherry? Excess debenture proceeds?
This is another one we're kind of trying to clean up some of the accounts. So, as council was aware, in September 2018, there was the debenture that was issued for the Kirkland Lake Aquatic Center, so it was for $12,674,778. And when they came up with the amount for the debenture, I gather there was probably still some uncertainty because they did have to come up with a number. So, as part of the 2018 year end, and when we were looking at the capital budget and doing our reconciliation, we looked at the whole project. So it started in 2014 and went to 2018. So we added up all the revenues and all the expenses, including the debenture amount. So what it turned out that there was an excess debenture proceeds of approximately $159,000. And if you were to look back at, it was a finance meeting held on March the 12th, and there was one item on that agenda. It was the 2018 updated capital budget, and there was a little reconciliation at the bottom, and it did make reference to that $159,000 being put into the reserve for infrastructure capital. So we wanted to leave it there because just in case anything else came out in 2019 that we weren't aware of, because as I say, the 12 million, it was the best estimate they could come up with at the time. So on the screen there, you'll see we do, what happens too in a big capital project like that, there's holdback amounts. So until certain conditions are met, and then we pay out the proceeds. So there is the non-refundable HST cost that has been incurred in 2019, and we have a little bit of a recovery on some interest on the line of credit. So right now there's a net capital expenditure to date of $2,600 with about another $300 to come. So basically the question is that we have almost $157,000 sitting in that reserve for infrastructure capital. So the fact that it's sitting in the bank account, basically, a regular bank account, we earn 2.22%. But the loan, we're paying interest at 3.72. So our recommendation is, and because the agreement signed for the debenture has that prepayment option, we would recommend that we take the $157,000 roughly, like I say, once we've paid out anything for 2019, which should be minimal, to put that against, as a prepayment against the loan. So that's our recommendation.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, and I agree with Sherry. I think we should, that $6,000 a year in interest on that little bit of money is not worth us having it. I think it's great to reduce our loan amount by the $157,000 almost.
Yeah, I agree. When I see this prepayment privilege, when I see it, I'll believe it. You've been in the investment business. I've never seen a debenture where you were able to prepay it, because these are sold to investors. They expect their rate of return, and you don't come halfway through it and say, oh, by the way, they paid half the loan. That's my understanding, but the world has changed since I was in banking. But Eugene, I think, so I think the TD may have made a mistake, but if they we have it in writing, I will gladly do a couple of cartwheels, because I find it hard to believe. But I could be wrong.
Okay, so just a couple, I did pull the agreement, and in the agreement it specifically mentions a 10% prepayment option. I did contact the bank, and they came back and they did tell me that yes, the town asked for the prepayment option. And what I did find in some of the old documents, I think what it was is the interest rate you pay, or the town is paying, is higher because you asked for that prepayment option. They're telling me there's no penalty. I will ask again, obviously, if this goes through and you do ask me to proceed and contact the bank, but I have it in an email where he said there is no penalty because it's in the agreement.
Yeah, that debenture, was it approved by this council or the previous one?
September 2018, so it would have been the last one.
Yeah, they didn't know what a debenture was. Sorry, that's my opinion.
Are you
I
gonna
remember the discussion, but anyway.
Are you gonna do the cartwheels or not?
Right on Main Street, or on Wood Street in front of the live entertainment. Councillor?
Good, I don't have a name now, so.
President's choice.
Sherry, I want to compliment you because you did something tonight that I never thought was going to happen in my 4-year term on council. You actually said something I understood. I too am surprised that we're able to pay down a debenture early. That, and my understanding was the same as Pat's, that the bank gives out the debenture, a third party buys it from the bank. As long as we can do that, let's pay down the debt. We're gonna save in the long run even more by paying down that money now. And certainly, like you said, the interest rate that we're paying is more than we're getting on the bank, so we're losing money every day that we have that money just sitting there waiting for it to be spent.
It's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council directs the Access Aquatic Centre debenture proceeds, approximately $159,000, be applied to the outstanding debenture loan balance.
Okay, not 159 though.
156, sorry. Approximately 156,000. Be applied to the outstanding debenture loan balance.
All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Sherry. Manager of Infrastructure?
Good evening, everyone. Past council, earlier this year we've had, well, this is concerning Woolworths parking lot, so 2224 Government Road West. It's for direction only. It's, again, it's the Woolworths parking lot. For report, this report is for information purposes only. Earlier this year we had approval of $4,000 to do some work on that parking lot on the old Woolworths site. And we also had a request to drop the curb and sidewalk that's on the water lane side in the back entrance. There's 55 feet of curb and 60 feet of sidewalk. So the curb could be ground down, 55 feet of it, and the sidewalk would have to be dropped, lowered down. So in order to do that, 60 feet and the 55 feet, 60 feet of sidewalk and 55 feet of curb, it'll be about $6,100 overall cost. So we're requesting an extra $2,100 to proceed with that. The grinding of the curb and the sidewalk the purpose was to enlarge the entrance going into it and add extra parking space. When the building sat there, there was 2 entrances for the back. One was back of the restaurant that was there, and then the Woolworths itself to the loading dock. So that's the reason why you see the curb in the picture, the way it was set up with allowing both entrances. So removing those curbs and that sidewalk, dropping it, will allow you more room to get in and out of that parking space.
Councillor Ivanov?
I don't know, I see lots of cars getting in and out of there, and I don't see an issue with it. I don't know, to spend an extra $2,100, or even the $6,000, to me sounds a little, a little wasteful, I think. I don't know, it looks fine. I walk by there and I see it full of cars all the time, so I'm thinking, these people have discovered that, or they're hitting that curb and banging on the bottom. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Councillor Rick?
First off, Don, I want to congratulate you on your upcoming retirement, and I hope it had nothing to do with me getting elected to council.
Not totally.
Anyways, okay, Eugene, just to explain, often, and I use that parking lot, especially when I have my truck, because I'm not good at parallel parking, so I find it quite convenient. It's in the middle of the block. Often there's a car parked right near that one side entrance, the one on the left. The entrance on the right actually goes over the neighbor's property. We haven't had a complaint that I'm aware of, but I think we want to be good neighbors. Now, having looked at the costs, and I went over and did a thorough inspection today of the site, I'm wondering if we can get away with just halving the project, not taking out the entire section, or take out the entire section, put down granular A and pack it so that you have a semi-hard surface, or taking out that sidewalk, or rather put in the same material you put beside the Park Lane. I don't know what the costs of these options are, but I know that I've had a number of occasions when it's been difficult to get in when you're going west because of the closeness of the parking. I must admit I was shocked at the expense of this project. I had no idea it would cost this much, and I agree with Eugene, it's not something we have to do. So if council decides to scrap the project, that's fine, because it's not a have-to-do thing. But maybe if we have to, we could come in under the 4,000 and provide better access. I don't know. If we were to half it, I think well, I'll leave that up to smarter minds to decide which half should be done.
Councillor Adams?
Yep, not really in favor of the 2,000 for that. I pull in there, I've never thought of that as an issue. Even during our budget talks at the beginning, the residents spoke up about this, saying it's fine. Winter's coming for the next 9 months, so whenever that happens, that's like you can just pull in at any point. There's no curb to even worry about, from my experience seeing that area. So I don't think it's worth $2,000, and I'm not in favor of this one.
I tend to agree. Councillor White?
I think possibly can we defer this until next budget so that we have better time to plan and get it done as well? And we could actually include it in our overall plans rather than making the end-all be-all decision tonight. We could possibly schedule it for next budget. That would be my suggestion.
Any other comments? Wolf?
I agree. Thanks, Don. That was your last run at the end, wasn't it?
Maybe not. Thanks, Rick. It wasn't all because of you.
Well, if it wasn't me, then it had to be my son.
That's it.
Thanks, Don. Request to amend the traffic and parking bylaw, sorry.
Yeah. Ashley isn't here, obviously. What she has instructed me to do is basically present the report with the focus on the recommendations at the end of each paragraph. I think that you'll find that a number of the recommendations are to bring the matter before the Police Services Board, and I think that will be taking place towards the end of the month. The costs involved with putting up signs are explained on the first page. As you're moving forward, there is some background discussion as to how the issue came up, and whether it had come from the public and how many times. The recommendations again on the first one, under A, is over to the Police Services Board. That's a four-way stop at Tweedsmuir, Harding, and Algonquin. The changing of all yield signs to stop signs, again, get it over to the Police Service Board because they may have a different opinion on flow of traffic. On C, the laneway speed limits, do research with other municipalities to determine what would be reasonable and what kind of wording they have used, as well as forwarding it over to the Police Service Board, because again, if you can't enforce it, then you may have to take that into consideration. On D, the co-op designated parking spots, I think again, that is something that should be discussed there, because as Ashley points out in the report, it could be that in a year or two later that suddenly you do need a spot. So perhaps it is something that you may want to consider as just keeping in the back pocket. E, one-way street between, or one-way between 4 and 6. Her recommendation is that the parking bylaw be amended to reflect laneway as a one-way. On F, the speed limit at Goldthorpe, she has a number of points, is to have the speed review. Petition the Ministry of Transportation to consider modifying the speed in this area. I think that just from some of the other reports in the media, the ministry is quite willing to work with municipalities on this. I think that Timmins is doing that as well for that area outside Porcupine, and that they are dealing with one or two other municipalities where the approach has come forward and they have been willing to entertain that. On G, the 22 to 24 Government Road West as a parking lot, I think her recommendation is do not designate it as such, because you do have the additional costs and the responsibility that comes with that, again at council's discretion. H, crossing guard, the one response is that it's a cost of roughly about $5,400 annually. There are challenges in recruiting people. There was an excellent question that came forward regarding a school crossing guard policy. How do you consistently measure and implement this feature? And I think that that's probably worth looking at, because historically, the municipality, people come forward with a concern and it's measured on the basis of need and risk. And that's fine, that works really well, but according to what standards are you assessing it, and are your decisions in a consistent manner that the public can also understand what factors you're considering when you determine risk. It may be something that is worthwhile looking at, and would leave that at council's discretion if you wished us to define such a policy and bring it back for your consideration. And at that point, I would ask that council give direction that the recommendations as the planner has put forward, we do proceed with those. I'm sorry I can't do a job like that Ashley does, but nobody can do a job like Ashley does, so it's okay.
Councillor Casey?
It's just a thought on the 2nd Street and Churchill Drive part for the crossing guard. I've seen a lot of municipalities come up with these, and I don't even want to know what I do, but I don't the cost of these new lights where they're accessible, and if the kid, instead of having a crossing guard there, the person trying to cross just activates the light, and when these yellow lights are flashing, that you have to, like, traffic's got to stop, so it's a way of slowing them down at problematic intersections like this one.
I think that's a good idea. Mr. Adams had raised it as well in the conversation, and it, I think we do need to have a look at it to see where the pole would be on the other side, and that, because I think there's a parking lot there. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be considered, but definitely we could take a look at that and see what the costs are and how well it would work in that area.
We can also move it up to the I don't know what the guidelines are with these intersections, like they're popping up all over the place. It's just, like you said, it is a problem recruiting crossing guards. I've been working at Jean Vanier for 16 years, and every year it's a different, actually several people go through that job, because it's, I don't know what the factors are, but it changes a lot. So if this is a way to alleviate or kill two birds with one stone.
Definitely bring that
Councillor
forward.
Perrier?
On item B, I think it is, it calls for yield signs changed to stop signs, but they're also looking at, it's a long stretch of road there, and there is a lot of speeding too, which I was hoping that they could look at the stop sign on that stretch as well, because just to slow the speeders down.
Sir, you're referring to Cameron and Hayes intersection at Swastika then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I was looking at, on the long stretch of putting somewhere a couple of stop signs, because it's just horrible. And there's a lot more kids now in Swastika than there used to be. Thank you.
Councillor Rick?
Yeah, I'm a little confused by these costs. I don't understand how a hand-dug sign installation is less than a machine and hand-dug sign installation. Do we not have a post-hole digger attachment?
I would assume it could also be whether there's pavement in the spot or anything like that as
Yeah,
well, too.
but
If Don wants to come up, he could probably address that better.
sorry, Don.
You're not off the hook yet.
Like I said. Sorry, so the difference in cost, Rick, again, like Wolf said, it all depends on what's in the area. If there's grass, concrete, asphalt, and then your yes, exactly. Then your restoration work and whatnot afterwards. If it's concrete, you may have to put concrete down.
But potentially could also be cheaper than that, right? I mean, it would take less. Do we have a post hole attachment that it digs down, that
Well, it would. it's
Squirrels
like a
down.
4 or 6 inch hole it would dig, so if it's a post hole, new sign installation is only a 2 inch pipe.
yeah,
So then you put your torpedo, cement your torpedo and whatnot in. You could go, and we have a back truck as well, so depending on what's in the area, I mean, your back truck would be even more. So it all depend on what material that you're.
And if they can get in there, too.
Exactly.
yeah.
it's
No,
tight, yeah.
I'm just looking for savings. Any way that I can, and you gotta remember, I've never done that for a living, so, you know, I've gotta ask the questions to find out.
I'm sure if we were in King Kirkland, it would be cheaper.
Oh, yes, I know it's sand there,
Sand.
but you may have to put some clay in order for it to stand
Well,
up.
yes, that's correct.
So, cost of removing a sign. Now, 125, what's that work out to in hours? Like, what's involved in that cost? $125 to undo a few bolts seems pretty high to me.
Or is that removal of the post as well?
I believe that that's just the sign, so the cost of the sign, the particular sign that might be going up, the labor, man hours, and vehicle, you have to charge the vehicle as well.
Okay,
So
so, yeah, but that's cost of removing a yield sign and replacing sign only with new signs, $180. Cost of removing a sign, $125. I'm wondering,
Again, it could
the
be.
time allotment that comes up, that, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking nuts and bolts here, right? To take a sign off, and yes, I know they've been there and they're frozen. You know, there's different approaches. You could grind them off, you could, whatever. It just seems that it shouldn't be more than a 15-minute job, a half hour if there's a real problem. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, because
Well, yeah, again, there's circumstances, traffic control, you set up traffic control, you have, you know, so you're off the side of the road, depending on the traffic flow. Torpedoes can, in some cases, which is the base plate, in some cases are down low enough where you can leave them in place. So, again, it's all depends on the situation.
yeah.
But again, you have your man hours, your traffic control signs, your,
I guess part of the problem for me is when the ratepayers see these prices, they like get really excited. And they let me know that they could put in a sign for less than $800, or whatever the last figure is that we had. And that's part of the reason I asked, because I want the ratepayers to know that, yes, there are safety requirements put out by the ministry that we must follow. And that takes time and it takes money. And for the life of me, I'd do that sign for $50, Don. But I'd also get dinged by the Ministry of Labor too. So I just trying to get that explanation out for the public.
Councillor Ivanov?
Yeah, I'm glad Don's still here. Speed bumps, does that work in Kirk Lake?
Speed bumps would work in.
I just wonder, when you're talking about speeding on some of these roads, I understand, the police can't police everywhere in town, and I just wonder if speed bumps would work, and you're talking about Hayes Avenue. I understand, if you're looking at slowing people down, sometimes hit one of those once, you remember next time not to, we have lots of speed bumps in town already, not manufactured, but just
Part of
whatever
the
they came
Kenworth
from.
roads?
Yeah, well, there's some of the roads are a little, yeah. But the laneway thing, I live in a laneway and I know how fast cars go up that friggin' laneway. They think it's they don't drive government road as quickly as you do that laneway. So I understand where you guys are coming from with that. I try to put a speed bump in the winter with my plow truck, but that goes away when the grader takes it away, so. But aside from that, I think some of these things are certainly worth paying $5,400 for a school crossing guard's a lot of money, and that adds up a number of years. So Casey's idea of trying to get something else in there where people can get a crosswalk with a light that puts a stop light up or something is a great idea.
Yeah, and I think speed bumps could work. The only thing I'm not, not familiar with is how they work in the winter months. for
I'm
plow.
thinking the same thing, if the plow has to go over it,
Yeah.
but if they're well constructed, I would think they'd probably stay in for more than a year.
We can check with other
Yeah.
municipalities and see with speed bumps in place how it works for winter maintenance.
Yeah.
I can check.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams?
Yep, on this omnibus bill in front of us, changing all yield signs to stop signs, if we can add input from the Temiskaming Health Unit. They have a road safety coalition as well, that they do a lot of modeling after the European model, which was highly recommended for the 2+1 highway and their road safety measures. If we're able to throw in the policy for crossing guards, that would be fantastic. That would just help measure, right? So our current way is that we implement the crossing guard, but do we go back and review the numbers, right? If that's not put in there, it's not gonna happen, right? Cause you would just have to go to the school boards and they'll tell you how many people are going.
They'll tell you that, but the police will also tell you what the traffic the traffic flow is like in those corners. Sometimes I know that, I'm trying to think on Second Avenue, it can seem really bad, but it's maybe 20 minutes. And it's not, so from a overall perspective, how does that play out and what's the appropriate tool? I think the reference to the health unit, I think that is in one of the other ones. I think
It
it's
is
good
on one
to,
of them.
yeah, I think it's good to bring it over into this one as well.
Also, if we can, if we're on this massive amendment, overnight parking and bylaw enforcement suspended for key holiday dates, especially on a way to help alleviate impaired driving, right? So if you're at a Christmas party or New Year's, you don't want to think about having to move your vehicle. So if we are able to make an amendment to our parking to allow parking on local roadways in municipal parking lots from 12:01 a.m. to 7 a.m. on December 25th, 26th, and New Year's Eve, I think that'd be a good one. I think some municipalities have tried that.
I'd like to go back to you and suggest that what others have found too is that when they do that, and then they have a big snowstorm or something and they have to get the guys out, now you got an argument with them on the streets too.
Yep.
But what council has always done is, okay, there's nothing forthcoming and whatever like that, we're not enforcing it. Go and stay there. 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I'm not sure which one is better, and I'm more concerned with allowing council the most flexibility, or the staff the most flexibility to make sure that their needs are met. I welcome other opinions on that.
Oh yeah, what a lot of municipalities also throw in is they have to be mindful of any snow removal requirements on those nights, right? It's already in writing.
Yeah.
It's just cements it.
It's, oh,
thought like that.
Casey?
Right now the bylaw says, no, you can't park on the street, so if you park there and the plow truck clips your vehicle, who's that, like, is it the driver's responsibility because he left his vehicle there? It shouldn't, like, I don't know who can answer that question.
I think that will come down to a nice little argument between the insurance companies on that.
Okay.
But
So
it would
now-
be in our favor, I think that
Okay.
it has been posted.
Reverse this, though. So now if we, the bylaw says that you are allowed to park on the street on those certain days and you get a massive snowstorm and that plow truck clips your vehicle, now are we liable because we gave you permission to park on the street?
I think my own read on it, I'm not a lawyer, is that we have assumed more responsibility because we now really should be going much more carefully. Don, you want to comment?
Oh, I think as you mentioned, whether it be on an area where we allow parking or we don't allow parking, it's again, it's a risk you take, I guess, in both parties. We can clip anything and it'd be an insurance claim.
I
basically.
just wouldn't want it to be a bigger burden on
I-
Yeah, no,
taxpayers
that's
in
a
the
good
long
question
think
that we
so.
should follow up with the insurance company then.
Sorry, I have noticed since sitting at the table that there's more and more of, concerns coming forth with traffic, all over town in Swastika and Chappie, et cetera. Would it be beneficial to have like a committee of the whole to bring the public in so we can kind of get a running list of where the public sees all these issues rather than them trickling in the way they are now? Personally, some of these issues are on the drivers themselves. The one that I'm looking at is the Tweedsmuir, the request for a four-way stop in Tweedsmuir. I was born and raised in Federal. That's always been a flow-through. There's never been an accident that I'm aware of, which might not be factual, but there has never been an issue. They're speeding down Gerson Hill. It's amazing that nobody's died at that corner, ourselves included, growing up in Federal. It is the responsibility of the driver to drive responsibly, and so all these issues coming forward, that has more to stay with the way we live now than the actual streets themselves, the planning of the streets. I am not a traffic professional. The best people to make these decisions are the police that enforce these rules, like not us, and I think it should all go to the police board first to get their input on it, and the planners and the ones that actually deal with traffic management.
The idea of putting it together as a whole probably would make it a lot easier, because there are probably issues that are the same, just in a different street. And if we could get like the question of speed bumps, okay, how does that work? Is that one of the things? Because if you bring the public in, they're going to ask and come forward with ideas. So it might be a good approach to do, have one or two open houses and a council of the whole then.
Rick?
Yeah, getting back to the overnight parking bylaw, and I just want to make a clarification before anybody jumps to any conclusions that even though I'm not able to drink responsibly, as the commercials say, I am quite jealous of people who can. So it has nothing to do with what I'm about to say. I'm not in favor of allowing parking on the holidays. I think it just adds confusion to the situations. And again, as the commercial says, plan ahead. You can choose, or most people can choose, how much they're going to drink. And they know before they're going that they're going to be drinking. It's their responsibility to deal with their car if they take it. I don't think we should make it more difficult for town workers to have to work if we have a snowstorm, to work around parked vehicles. That shouldn't be put on the town workers. The overall decrease of safety to anybody that would have to travel should there be a snowstorm that night and they have to go to the hospital or whatever, that should not be put on that person. The responsibility lies with the person who goes out. And I don't think we should change the bylaw to accommodate them. They need to plan ahead. They need to do what they're doing. When I did drink, I either walked home or took a cab home. My car could be found at the Legion or in Northern College parking lot on occasions, and the walk back in the morning was never pleasant. But that's the person who takes the vehicle. That's their responsibility, not ours to change a law to accommodate them.
My only comment, Rick, I agree, it is the responsibility of the driver, but if it's gonna save somebody's life, I would rather go the extra mile for these odd days of the year that, not odd days, but, it's not very often. We're talking Christmas and New Year's, really. Go ahead.
I'm not sure how changing the bylaw is gonna save anybody's life. My experience and watching people that I used to drink with, if I got it in my mind that I was driving home, I drove home. Didn't matter where my vehicle was parked. Changing the bylaw is not gonna, I don't believe will have any effect on the number of impaired drivers that hit the road.
I don't believe we need to change the bylaws, in my opinion. I think we can give staff and the snow removal crew, some flexibility, and the bylaw enforcement officer, but that's my personal opinion.
So I have a motion that's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White. The council has received the report on request to amend the traffic and parking bylaw. The Police Services Board be asked for recommendation on items, and that staff take council's comments into consideration, and that staff schedule a committee of the whole meeting for public input prior to bringing forth bylaw amendments.
Councillor Owens?
Just to be fair to the OPP, can we add on there that they get a copy of this report prior to the police board? Because this is an awful lot of
There's a big-
information.
I agree, Rick. All in favor?
Anything on the crossing guard policy?
That's part of your recommendations. Do you want that?
Actually,
Do you wanna work on it,
if it
crossing
comes from
guard?
council, I want it in there.
Okay. So we're also going to add in that crossing guard policy be brought forward.
All in favor? Okay. Okay.
Can we ask staff to look into the cost of what Casey suggested of the erecting a light?
Definitely.
Because that seems like a really good idea.
Yeah, I think what we can do is look into the costs as well as the feasibility in different locations, what's required in that.
Dulisker just finished theirs for $45,000. One, fully accessible with the crosswalks and everything. Dulisker, 45,000.
Introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws.
Mr. Mayor, before we get to that, there was the addition to the agenda, which was a late addition that came in. This was a request from the 100th Anniversary Committee.
Right, sorry.
They are holding their volunteer and sponsor appreciation evening, and they're asking for council to recognize this as a municipally significant event in order to help them with their liquor license. So I have a resolution that is moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The council declares the 100th Anniversary Volunteer Appreciation Evening on Friday, November the 8th, 2019, from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. as a municipally significant event.
Can I just question on that? It's a special events license they're looking for.
Yes.
This has got a little bit different name to it.
It's SOP, an SOP license. which is a.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Special-
no, I understand that, but what,
They're asking for, it in order to get, to help with their application.
The
they
special
need a-
occasion
They
permit.
need it to be called a declared a municipally significant event. by
Okay.
the municipality.
Okay.
So,
thank you. All in favor? Passed. Questions to council?
oh, can I do a bylaw?
Sorry,
Should I go to
sorry.
bylaw? Yeah. So, we have one bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White, that bylaw 19-089, being a bylaw to deem lots 168, 170, and 171 of Plan M15T, which is 36 and 38 Prospect and 8 Kirkpatrick, not to be registered, that is registered, be read a first, second, third time, enacted and passed. So this is a bylaw to merge those 3 lots on time.
All in favor? Passed. Questions from council to staff? None declared. Notice of motions? Oh, Councillor White?
Sorry, I think there has been quite a few questions from council to staff that we've been unable to, that have been addressed tonight. For instance, the policy on crossing guards, that was one that came through. I'm really starting to get concerned that a lot of our questions that we are asking aren't appearing in this section. They're answered, definitely, but they're not appearing as per our amendment in our thing. So from time to time, we used to put it into the admin email. Are we still doing that?
To be quite honest with you, I'm not so sure where that email is going at this point in time, and I have not received any questions from council, so I think I'll send an email out to everybody. Maybe we need to, if you send it to clerk@TKL rather than
Yeah.
admin, at least then we know then that I will get those questions. But as of right now, I can't say, it's been almost 3 weeks, I've not received anything from that admin, no, so.
Notice of motions? None declared. Confirmation bylaw?
Sorry, I'm just,
Sorry.
no, I've lost some motions, some resolutions. I don't know if somebody has some. But I can write some, it's okay.
Must have been the fonts.
That's true. We had a pig here earlier today too.
Is that the name?
Yes.
Porky.
So I have a motion that is moved by Councillor Stacy White, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier, that bylaw 19-099, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held October 1st, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Passed. Councilors' reports? Councillor White?
So this, in September, I had the pleasure of going back after summer break to the Museum Advisory Committee and the Library Board. I do have news from both of them. However, the first one that I'd like to start out with is the Foods for Fines from the Texcentennial Library. Our CEO, Cheryl, came up with this idea. It's absolutely brilliant. So for those who owe fines to the library, if they drop off a toiletry or non-perishable food item, to the library, they get $3 off for each item. So it's a great way for the library to clear their books and for the community to help the community. After October 10th, all the food and toiletries will be dropped off at the local food bank. So A+ for the library board, and Cheryl for thinking of that. I just wanted to share the numbers for the library over the summer, because they are absolutely amazing. The first is in June, 3,280 visits. July, 3,784 visits. And in August, 4,653 visits. This is definitely a testament to the hard work of the staff, and our children department is absolutely blowing up. And a final thanks to the Friends of the Library. They donated 24 new chairs to the children's department over the summer. So their fundraising efforts are really paying off, and kudos to them. As far as the Museum Library Board, I also want to thank the museum auxiliary members. Without their countless hours of volunteerism and their financial support, the museum would be an absolute shell of what it is today. They often donate large sums of money to get the job done. Unfortunately, we did suffer a setback at the museum. We were supposed to have the Once Upon a Time medieval exhibit. We were unfortunately unable to provide that for the month of September because the shipping for this traveling exhibit is $7,000. We have zero funding for the museum for traveling exhibits, which is a shame. Part of the mandate should be that we can have these amazing exhibits from other museums and other cultural centers come into our community. We were also in danger of losing our tattoo exhibit that's supposed to come in the new year because its shipping was $2,800. And yet again, zero money in our budget to cover this. Thankfully, a sponsor stepped up and they'll be going through with it. And again, 100 times over, if it wasn't for the volunteers at the auxiliary, our museum wouldn't be as successful as it is even now. So kudos to the volunteers.
Thank you, Stacy. Any other comments? I have a couple to make. This week, the Trillium Foundation was up in Kirkland Lake to present the Kirkland Lake Hospital on their organ tissue donation success. There's only 3 communities in Ontario that have received 100% success rate back-to-back years. Kirkland Lake is one of them. That means that for every death that took place, they were able to make contact with that family and were able to have them agree to do tissue donations. So kudos to them. That's from what I attended that presentation, and the Trillium Foundation said it was very rare to see that across the province. So congratulations to the Kirkland Lake Hospital and their staff. Also, and this goes along with the hospital as well, Dr. Mark Spiller was, I believe, provincially recognized for his service to the community. He certainly has done a lot of work for our people of Kirkland Lake, so congratulations to Dr. Spiller. Adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council adjourns its regular meeting of October 1st, 2019 to an in-camera meeting pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act to discuss 1 possible land lease, 2 potential sale of land issues, and 1 issue concerning an identifiable person.